Okay, we are live on UNLV Biomechanics Facebook page, and we are recording. I'm John Mercer, professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and president of our Las Vegas Triathlon Club. And I'm pleased to have a conversation with a local physical therapist, a friend, a colleague, fellow competitor as well. I've got Dr. Mike Russell on the call today. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
What's going on, everybody? Glad to be here, Dr. Mercer. I appreciate you inviting me on, man. This is a blast.
Yeah, no, this is great. And, I need to give a little bit of history here is that you and I have known each other for some time. We actually worked on a research project years and years ago while you were going through the PT program. And that, to this date, is one of my favorite projects that I've actually worked on. That was actually really neat. There you go. Yeah, that I used.
Look what I came across. Yeah, I came across it and went, and just in the questioning about why I work with running populations. I mean, we started right there. We started talking about leg length, stride length, things of that nature, and the forces that are created because of the change, either shortened, lengthened, or preferred.
No, that's right. And so that was a neat study that we did that, one was a result of a lot of neat conversations and has driven a lot of other questions that I've had and I think you have as well and tried to explore. So it's been fun. So, but I want to, even before we do that, I want to go back a little bit in time because we have a lot of undergraduate students in our kines program that are really interested in going into physical therapy. And so this is a great opportunity for them to hear you and what you've been through. So if you would, just tell me, how'd you get into physical therapy? How'd you choose this area?
So what's really funny is I started thinking about how all my process to get into physical therapy happened. I'm married to my wife now who has 3 brothers that are physical therapists. And so that makes me number 4. But, it was pre-meeting them and making the decision to go into PT school, I was interested in athletic injury. And so when I started my college kind of career, I was sort of on the path of law enforcement and went, no, I really didn't want to do quite that. Mm-hmm. I had an affinity for helping somebody get back on the court. So basketball player tweaked his ankle, football player hurt his shoulder, back, neck, something of that nature. It was fun to say, hey, I helped you get back to doing what you do, what you love to do. But I didn't want to just be an athletic trainer. When there's nothing wrong with being an athletic trainer. I think athletic training complements the physical therapy that I do very, very well. So in kind of being on the athletic training track and learning about athletic injury and rehabbing from injury, it was pretty easy as I met my brothers-in-law. One was a graduate of USC. The other was currently at UNLV, going through their program early on. So they both mentored me and my brother-in-law, who he and I both graduated at the same time from different programs. But we kind of just came up, and we Thanksgivings are actually kind of fun for our family. We get to sit and talk physical therapy, and aunts and uncles come up and show me their total knee replacement scars and their injuries, and I think it's like we have a little round table of how to repair and help everybody get back to functioning just a little bit better. But so, yeah, I never was like a really good athlete. I just like being around them and helping them get better and get back to doing what they do. So it was an easy transition for me. I loved it.
That's awesome. And yes, it's so important to have good physical therapists because the knowledge that you have, it's different than an MD or DO.
Right.
And it's important to be able to, especially when you're doing endurance events or really any sports, to have a good physical therapist. Let's back up a little bit more then. And so what was your undergrad degree in?
So I did a kines undergraduate degree. It was right what I wanted to do. I did transfer in from another small school in Idaho. And so it was kind of a sports injury management. And the carryover, instead of doing athletic training track, I knew what I wanted to do. So I went to the kines track and really enjoyed it. I had such a good time doing everything that we did. And I am a UNLV grad, both undergrad and graduate. And awesome. I was really blessed to have good instructors.
That's great. And so let's talk about your grad program then. So you went from
Yep.
undergrad, got into the grad program. I can't remember, was it a master's at that point, or was it a
Yeah.
DPT when you started
You
it?
know, we transitioned
Okay.
mid our first year. We went from master's to the doctoral physical
Okay.
therapy program.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so it was a 3-year program.
Correct. Yeah, 3 years. So a year of pretty much, didactic work,
Mhm.
morning till night. At the end of our first year, we got to go out onto our first clinical rotation. And then second and third year was a greater mix of clinical affiliations, some didactic work, and then a little bit of research as well.
That's awesome. Now, a lot of our students will be looking at graduate programs. What types
Mm-hmm.
of things should they be looking for when they're looking at our PT program or other PT programs? What do you
You
suggest?
know, it's so funny. I've just recently met some folks from a couple of different programs, AT Still University in Arizona, Missouri State University, a couple other different programs. And, everyone, there's a little bit of something different at each program.
Mhm.
And that's what you kind of have to investigate on your own. UNLV at that time had a very, very small cohort. So I was in a class of 19.
Mhm.
And so 19 with about 7 professors gave us a really good ratio of professor to student ratio. So it was very, very hands-on. We were very, very close. And that changes. It's just the way that it is. So unfortunately, what we're seeing now is more and more private programs that are developing, not the state schools, and they're expensive, Doc. I mean, Dr. Mercer, man, these kids are coming out with $180,000 in debt.
Yeah.
So, and that's school, that's just school alone. And then you add, whatever else has to go on top of that. So, I really caution people to really pay attention to the state schools
Mhm.
and to trying to get something that you have in-state tuition with.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I've never been asked what program I went to. And I've never had somebody not see me because I was a UNLV grad and not a Duke grad or a USC
Yeah.
grad. I just don't happen to see that very often.
That's a great point. Yeah, and because they're picking you because of your expertise that you've built up and have in the community, and that's important.
I agree with that. And it's like, I've never, as long as I feel that somebody helping me is qualified and
Hmm.
we have a good relationship, I trust them and,
Yeah.
I'll put my faith in them and see how it works out.
No, that's awesome. So PT is always, changing, and there's,
Hmm.
a lot of new tools available, treatment modalities, as well as software packages to work with patients. How do you now that you've been in the field, and you started your own business? Maybe we need to back up there. So let me ask you about your business. How did you
Yeah.
decide to start your own business? Because I do want to get to how do you stay current with the
Yeah.
knowledge, but you started optimal physical therapy. So talk
Yeah.
about starting that and taking the risk.
I think the one thing I did want to do was be self-employed and not for any kind of, reason other than I wanted to be in control of me. And I knew working for somebody else, I just wouldn't have that ability. So the opportunity came for me to buy a company called Henderson Physical Therapy
Mm.
out here in the suburb of Vegas. And it was great. The owner at that time he was motivated and he was ready to retire. He was done, had
Yep.
plans, and was ready to move on. So it was a perfect situation. I left a great mentor,
Mm-hmm.
worked with him for 2 years, and then I made a transition and started working for myself. And it was something my family and I agreed to. And so once we purchased Henderson Physical Therapy, we had some growth opportunities come out of that helped us move back into Las Vegas. So we went from Henderson to Las Vegas to Henderson to Las Vegas. And so, we built one clinic and we turned it into 5. And that's tough. And it's
That's
not
awesome.
very it's tough. It's very stressful,
Mm-hmm.
but the people you kind of pick up along the way, the staff and the
Yeah.
associates and the colleagues that are working side by side with me, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievable that that it happens. But I did want to have a business. I like the business aspect of things. I like that challenge as well as being a physical therapist. And I think it's hard to find those balances in people. Somebody who wants to be entrepreneurial and someone who wants to be a practitioner. So you kind of have to, for me, I wanted both. I wanted to level it out as best I can and try to go, hey, I want to give the best treatment, but I can only give the treatment that I want to give if I'm in control. So if I'm in control of, what insurances we take or what my what my treatment schedule is and things of that nature.
That's awesome. And I can think back to, you said your undergrad was in sports injury management, or you started in that. I know that's a lot with athletic training, but there's also the management part. And so as you progressed through your undergrad and your grad program, did you seek out any courses or training on the business side, in the entrepreneurial side?
If that's the one thing I think anybody would say is lacking in any field, right, is the entrepreneurial side of things. So medical school, they don't teach you to be a business. They don't teach you to own a business. They teach you how to treat. They teach you how to practice medicine. And the same thing with physical therapy. I mean, yes, you get kind of like this small introduction to it. And then when you're on your affiliations, if the owner or whoever you're working closely with is willing to kind of share a little bit of their journey and their process and what they did. And I had the privilege of having a brother-in-law who owned his own clinic in California, who I was able to talk to and kind of bounce ideas off of. And then when the opportunity came just for me to purchase my first clinic and go from there, it felt good. I wasn't scared. I wasn't nervous. It was, you just kind of, hey, if I'm going to work this hard, I'll do it for me and not for somebody else.
That's great. Well, so that's neat. I mean, you had to pick the skills up on your own. And I've said that even with our kinesiology degree, I do wish that we had a stronger partnership with, some business training, because a lot of our students will end up in some type of management and fitness industry or
of course,
or starting their own business. And so,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a lot of work to pick up the knowledge on your own. So
yeah, it is. It's, you learn, you learn some expensive lessons too. It's, the IRS is no joke. And when you're late on a payment, they let you know.
Oh, that's great. All right. So now, how do you stay current? Maybe it is with business practices, but PT, obviously you're running a business, so you've got to stay up on that aspect, leadership, team building, what have you, but you also need to stay current with your PT. And I know you're an active in treating people too. So
I am. Yeah. That's been the biggest part of me being a business owner is being an operator and actually putting my hands on patients. It's not theoretical. It's all practical from my standpoint. But I like what you said, the leadership aspect of things. If I didn't have the team that I had, that I have right now, I wouldn't have been able to grow, because the growth can't happen if I'm not in there. If it's, the greatest picture I ever saw from a leadership sort of seminar was a floor or the floor, a roof, and then support structures. And if you have marketing and you have finance and you have these different pillars, and if you're one of the pillars standing there and holding it the whole time, you can't make it bigger. You can't expand on it because you're standing there and holding it up. So I had support staff and people supporting me, and the culture that we have and the growth mindset that we had. And there was a year we expanded 2 clinics in 1 year. So we built out 2 facilities, bought equipment for 2 facilities, and hired staff for 2 facilities. So it was tough. The Christmas bonuses weren't as good that year. And it was something that we had all talked about and said, hey, it's not going to be good this year, but when we do make it, it's going to be a better year the year following. And it was. And it worked out really well.
That's great. And so that's really great to hear. And then, because you're taking a risk, but yet you have the confidence that what you're offering is a good service, and
for sure,
working with people and having some success. How about with PT? I mean, you obviously go to conferences and
Yeah, that's the hard part. And I remember one of the big things that I wanted as a new grad, I wanted to attend two courses, postgraduate courses my first year, after graduating PT school, because PT school, I had, my breadth of knowledge was so wide. I wanted to dig a narrow trench, and I wanted to make sure that's what I liked.
No.
You know, rather than just being a very wide kind of a, you know, someone who treats kind of a wide variety, someone who's suffered a stroke versus someone who's had a shoulder replacement or a knee replacement or something of that nature. I wanted to kind of go, well, which direction do I really want to go? So what I did is I took courses that focus or gave me emphasis on the use of my hands, which gave me the ability to more effectively tell people what's wrong with them. And getting into endurance, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, in just a little bit, but the treatment, the evaluation or the examination is so critical, because I can't tell you how many patients have come in and said, I went to whoever, and it's not that other person's fault. It was just the lack of ability to listen, to feel, and to give them a correct treatment strategy that helps them get back to doing what they're doing. Because you know more than anybody, a runner will always run. It doesn't matter how much it hurts, how bad it looks, and they're gonna do it. So if you can't figure out what the problem is and address it, and then give the correct treatment strategy to it, you're 6 weeks wasted, and it just happens. It's just kind of part of this learning. And as we get, some of us tend to get better. I mean, there are those that don't, and it is what it is. That's just kind of how it is. I didn't want to be that way. So, theories change a little bit over time, and we're learning more and more now about pain science, which is really good, which is the pain is generated by our brain and manifest somewhere in our body. Although there is a tissue that is physically injured, but the brain is developing what's happening. So when somebody is coming in and holding their arm right here and says, man, my arm hurts on the side of their arm, I know that has nothing to do with this part of their arm, because there's no joint here. There's just attachment of muscle that is more insertion. We know that it's coming from somewhere back here because of overuse, too much too soon, or poor quality of movement. And so they do that over and over and over again, and it manifests here. If we treat here, or if we put ice here, we don't get resolved. We don't get a resolution of the symptom.
That's awesome. And I really like how you describe this, because you're describing it as, being a detective. You're really trying to sleuth out what's going on. You have some pathways to follow, and that's going to be an exciting day to day. Every day's got to be a little bit different.
Oh man, I'm telling you what, and that's the best part of it. And so, I'm very opinionated, and you know it, but and maybe a couple of the folks that I know, I just have strong opinions, and I don't not like somebody else's way of thinking, but I personally don't want to be in a clinic where it's post-operative rehabilitation, right? Because there's a protocol. If you have your rotator cuff repaired, 0 to 6 weeks you do this, 7 to 10 weeks you do this, 11 to 13. It's planned out for you. There's no thought. It's just do it. As opposed to the endurance community, triathlon runners, cyclists, swimmers. I mean, it's a phenomenal way, and sometimes things aren't working. You're going, man, I'm sorry, this my detective works, I'm off, I can't figure it out. And go back into some of the problems, take into these other comorbidities, right? So you take someone with diabetes, and what's the complication? What's someone that has a autoimmune problem? What about is it a autoimmune flare, or is it a musculoskeletal injury? So there's even a deeper depth to it.
That's great. All right. So now that you are where you are now, what would you tell your younger self, either in undergrad or grad, in terms of where to spend your time or where not to spend your time?
Yeah.
What would you tell your younger self to get to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, first off, you tell them to be patient.
Yeah.
You just have to be. You have to let the process happen. And if I went back, there was an analogy made by Gray Cook in one of his books, and he's a physical therapist, a strength conditioning guy, and he talked about carrying a calf. The analogy of carrying a calf to and from a village, right? Home to a village. For whatever reason, you have to carry a calf. Well, the calf gets bigger over time and turns into a cow or a bull. And so you go from a small animal to a very large animal, but you're still able to carry that load to and from.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to do. You have to say, you have to start somewhere and then you'll ultimately finish. But in the meantime, be patient, let the process happen. And I'm grateful for my mistakes. I'm grateful for the trip ups and the falls and the errors, you know, and thankfully nothing was catastrophic. I mean, no one was hurt, you know, other than me, my ego, or maybe my bank account for a period of time until we, you know, you try to get it back or whatever. But it's a process. And so you have to tell, and all these guys right now that are in the kines and girls and, you know, aspiring physical therapists, and I'll just speak from a physical therapy standpoint, there is a process to this and you have to be patient with it. And then you will gravitate to the area of practice that you want to be in. Because I don't think everyone should treat a runner. You don't have to be a runner to treat a runner either, but it does help. I mean, I'm nursing a calf injury right now and I'm going, well, this is what I tell everybody else to do. Oh, well, yeah, gee, go figure, it works. I'm glad it does.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it. And you describe a lot of self-reflection and that leads to that growth mindset, if you will, that is really, really important. So that's great to hear. All right, let's leave academics. Let's talk endurance stuff. So talk about your connection with the endurance community.
So I was fortunate enough to get an invitation to meet with a lady named Jackie Arkana, with whom you're very familiar with. Her training group was called Excel Training Group. And I was fortunate enough to associate with them professionally and then get to build relationships with not only Jackie, but with with the people she trains and the community that she brought along with her. So what I learned quick that runners are very, very tight knit and they really, really enjoy what they do almost religiously. That it's not only the run, but it's the after run. Yeah. It's the time spent together afterwards, or it's the time spent at the event. You know, the run at the Tusher Mountains in Utah. I think all of the Las Vegas Valley was there doing this ridiculous climb. I mean, like it was just, I think it kicked everybody's butt this year. But people, that's the whole point. It's let's go, let's work hard, let's get together and then talk about it and reflect.
It's that community, that building of community. So, and I know you've been part of that. All right.
I'm happy to.
Let's talk about your triathlon experience. How about just from your personal perspective, your first triathlon?
Yeah. Oh man, sprint triathlon in St. George, Utah, but not the BBSC ones, right? This was the community pool, a mile swim, a 10-mile bike ride, and a 3-mile run.
Nice.
I swear, I thought I won the Super Bowl of triathlon when I finished that thing, and who knows how far behind everybody I was. But I borrowed a tri bike, put on some jammer shorts, and just gave it a shot. And I had good friends that were interested in it. There was a lot of hype about 10 years ago about triathlon in general. So we're seeing the Ironman World Championship on TV. We're getting more and more aware of this type of activity, and hooked. I was running 2 miles like 3 days a week. I thought that was the end of the world. I was done. I got no more. And so I got tricked into signing up thinking it was like a 10K. And so, then, the last like 3 weeks before this event, I'm trying to get a bike. I'm trying to get swim goggles. I'm trying to get everything ready to go up and do this event.
Oh, I love it though. I mean, far too often people, look at triathlon and there's a lot of barriers to getting in the sport. Got to get a bike, got to get this and that. But yeah, I love it that you just say, I'm just gonna go do it, and I'll borrow a bike, I'll wear jammers,
Mm-hmm.
just whatever it is, whatever it takes to get it done. That's so cool to hear.
Yeah, it was a hard thing, but it was worth it. The value afterwards was
Oh.
just unbelievable. So yeah, that was a blast.
All right, so I know you see a lot of triathletes as patients, so I don't know which way you look at that. That's either good or a bad thing. And like you said, there's triathletes that maybe train maybe 5 hours a week, and those that train 20 plus hours a week. So, and you're dealing with, maybe I'll just say endurance athletes in general. What are some of the mistakes that you see them causing them to see you?
Well, and what's funny about triathlon, you're training for 3 events
Mhm.
in one day. It's hard enough for a basketball player to play uninjured. It's hard enough for just to run and not get injured. And then you kind of add a different part of everything. But what's nice about it is they are 3 separate things, and there's different muscles, there's different systems, there's different things that are happening. So sometimes you're good enough to not overload a system.
Mhm.
You're good. You're gonna not have a whole lot of ground reaction force on your legs during the run while you're riding or swimming, and then you're not using as much as your upper extremity on bike in the run as you do in the swim. Um, so I'll just kind of, for practical purposes, what happens is the cross training that happens outside of the training is where people can have the greatest effect. And it's hard. So you had mentioned some people spend 5 hours a week, others spend 25 hours. They have a part-time job in training. Saturday and Sundays are 16-hour training days. And so they're doing that specifically for a specific race that is of a specific kind of elevation and temperature and things of that nature. So what we're doing either off season or in between races is where I think people are going to get hurt, right? Especially for long distance. I think our short distance folks are going to be okay initially, because a 3-mile run's not too bad after a 800-yard swim or whatever it is versus in a 12-mile bike ride. So you go, and then it's the kick from sprint to Olympic, where it really challenges your system because you're training that much more. And the problem with endurance athletes is they don't like to, one, move lateral, so they don't use lateral muscles, and two, they don't want to pick up a weight.
Mhm.
And do a resistance type of training either outside. And you have to remember, there's a training cycle. There's a appropriate place to do deadlifts and heavy squats, and that's not a week before your big race, right? But it's the preparation prior to that 6-month entry into training where you're going to try to get your system ready to load, right? Too much too soon is the game ender, right? So we're a month away from our marathon and I'm undertrained. So in the last 2 weeks, I'm going to double my mileage. You're going to get injured,
Mhm.
period, the end, no doubt about it. And then your run's going to suck. You're going to DNF, or you're just not going to go because you're like, hey, I'm not ready. And then, you let that type of psychology get inside you.
Mm. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that too much, too soon, too fast type of thing is great. Now, I know you said you don't need to be a runner to be able to treat running, but at the same time, you need to understand the sport, and you understand running and triathlon, which is why people gravitate to you for your expertise. So when someone does show up and they have an injury already, how much do you end up diving into the details of their training program, their injury history? I know you spoke a little bit about doing a lot of listening, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit about trying to dive into some of the details of what they're doing.
What's been great is there's some great trainers that are around town that are a little more specific to the endurance community, who will actually add some load to these endurance athletes. And so they're very, very accommodative. They pay attention, and they're okay to listen when the physical therapist kind of wants to pull them back on certain things. They're 100% on board with it. So from my standpoint, if it's a run-related injury, we discuss their training mileage and any change in between the time, a period before they got hurt up until the point that they got hurt. What are they training for and what's the distance? And then you look at that training plan and you go, gosh, you were kind of under training for what was going to be a difficult race. Did you jump super fast? Yes. Okay. Or some people, if it takes only so many degrees to boil a pot of water, you shouldn't just be putting the flamethrower to it, right? It's just too much. Back it off a little bit. It's a half marathon, downhill, do some quad training, watch your knees, you're good. So we're going to dive into that. I'll ask about the run wear, the equipment that they're using. And then we start talking about, okay, rest, nutrition, any kind of strengthening or any kind of crossover training that they might be doing. And try to add all these variables up and then ask them, hey, are you stressed? Is COVID messing with you? Are you going back to work next week and you kind of don't want to? You've enjoyed time with your family, training. Are you a little scared about what's happening out there? Psychology is a big part of this, and that could very easily trick an old nagging injury, or like I said, the brain creates the pain even in the presence of tissue injury, right? So if there's something going on, your brain will manifest it for sure.
Wow, that's great. So, I mean, it's a holistic approach, and
yeah, absolutely,
in all these
absolutely. And then we're going into, the motion. Like, okay, what's your mobility like? Can you flex?
Yep.
And runners are bad. They have, John, we're going to have to do something with this low back issue in runners, because they can flex forward, palms to the floor, no problem. And when they come up to extend, they go just past neutral and they're like, done. I can't go much beyond that. And then when you start testing muscles in the lower extremities, the posterior chain, they're weak. Runners have this thing like, they're like, yeah, I run. I've got strong legs. And you ask them to do any kind of movement and they're like gone, toast. So it's a big, it's definitely a well thought out process.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because a couple of years ago, we did a run clinic, brought in a running expert who was probably more on really focusing on posture during running. And I remember she had everyone stand and, was doing, okay, let's do a posture check. And she said, everyone just stand up straight. And then she went around the room and physically put them straight. And they're like, I can't believe I'm not standing straight. And I did. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
It's really, I think you're onto something. I think that posture or that trunk lean is habitual, and maybe we just don't, we don't, as runners, pay enough attention to it.
Absolutely. There's something there. We'll find it.
Well, maybe this transitions to, you mentioned strength training and the importance of that. How does strength training enter your rehab, and how much strength training should endurance athletes be doing before they come in and see you?
Hey, so one of that whole process is we do manual muscle tests. And people, young therapists that are training, with everybody, you've got to sit there and go, okay, look, let's measure side to side difference, right? We grow like a tree. We're not all symmetrical, right? But let's do a side to side comparison. And let's say if this muscle's weak and this isn't, and this is the injured side, well, then maybe there's something there. Maybe if it gets stronger and we are able to balance you out a little bit better, we're going to make something happen. So in physical therapy, and this is what's hard, like let's just take running, for example. If you're running 25-mile weeks, that's a lot of time dedicated to doing it. And so it's hard to give up maybe 3 or 4 hours to strength training or to resistance training. And so what'll happen is people will easily sacrifice the resistance training. Yeah. So when the breaking point hits and we determine what's weak and what's strong or what's not strong enough. I mean, that's where physical therapy comes in. Don't get me wrong, there's all sorts of treatment modalities to get rid of pain super fast. But once again, the process to get the strength back or to get range of motion back or to get something to happen, it takes just a little bit of time. And once again, the patience thing has to come in, and we just have to remember, hey, it's a process. We got to go through it all.
That's great. And now, I don't want you to give away your secret sauce here, but, and I don't want to put you out of business, but what advice do you need to give triathletes so they don't have to come and see you? Because I always say, you're going to give yourself the best chance to be successful if you're, healthy at the start line. So what advice can you give to the endurance athletes?
I mean, isn't that just imagine that for a second, all the time you put in to go to the start line with an injury and go, yeah, I can't give it my best, or I'm not going to finish. Or, I mean, that DNF looms over people's minds so hard. I've seen athletes crying on the ground because they don't want to quit, but they can't. They're cramping, whatever. They're just toast, right? Hey, and let me just kind of say this. If I could give enough information to people that I go out of business, I would do it. Don't give me, and you want to know why? Because I'll give it all away free. I'll talk to anybody. Anybody wants to email me, anybody wants to call me, I'll do it, because they won't do it, John. You know this. I'll say, here's what you need to do. Do it. And they won't do it. So here's what they need to do. Lateral hip strengthening. Lateral hip strengthening is probably the first and foremost cause of run-related injury, unless it's some nagging back issue that's developing. So if an athlete flexes forward with no problem, comes back up to vertical, but has pain, right, extending backwards just at the low of your back, okay, then that needs to be addressed with posterior chain strengthening, glute, hamstring, okay? And that's resolved with single leg deadlifts, squats kind of loaded towards the backside. Front squats tend to hit quads. So I know that's not lateral hip stuff, but that's kind of that low back issue. So when there's any kind of hip or knee issue, potentially even a foot, think at the hip first. Runners don't typically have knee pain. It's coming from either a foot issue or a hip issue. And so we'll correct the foot issue temporarily with orthotics. You do not need to wear orthotics for the rest of your life. You just need to correct something, strengthen it, and then get rid of them. So that's my one opinion that I'll stand behind and I'll back up. So hip motion, right? If you think about swimming, cycling, and running, it's all linear. We're all going in one direction. All you got to do is lateral step, monster walks, band around the knees, around the ankles, around the toes, step laterally, lay on your side, kick laterally, lateral planks, lateral plank with a leg lift, something of that nature to get that lateral hip musculature to start firing. As it weakens, you're going to get a drop. And in that drop, you're going to get a knee valgus. And in that knee valgus, you're going to get overpronation. And then overpronation is going to create all these other issues. So hip, low back is one area. And then our foot and ankle, plantar fasciitis and Achilles injuries are just hard. It's just tough. So plantar fascial or plantar fasciopathy, because the term plantar fasciitis is kind of a misnomer. By the time we're feeling that pain, we're beyond the itis. We're no longer, it's not an acute inflammation. It's now entered subacute into chronic. So there's nothing, the rolling your foot on the bottle bull crap, if you think it works, fine. Like I said, the brain's a very, very strong thing, but I promise I will never tell anybody to roll their foot over a bottle for any reason whatsoever. It's too much, too soon. And we can get into footwear later on. That's where you're really, really good with that too. And we could talk maybe about what's going on with the footwear, and then Achilles. Okay, insertional versus muscle belly or a mid-muscle injury, it's two different injuries. And the examination is what's going to tease out all three of those. So heel pain is very, very difficult. It's either bottom, so you have a fat pad injury, it's medial, it's plantar fascial insertion, or it's kind of like wrapping, or if you put your fingers and your thumb and your finger around your heel and went, the pain is right there, that's insertional Achilles. So just in that, just asking a question to know what you have will help you rehab it, because they're all a little, they're just very, very subtle difficulties.
This is great. And I have to give a shout out to the endurance community, and they need to really listen to that, including myself. And then they need to replay that last 5 minutes and really listen and absorb those tips, because those that's a gold mine right there. I mean, that is really great advice.
If I can be, like I said, I'll talk about this till the cows come home from their endurance run. We'll talk about it over and over and over, but it's something that continues to keep happening, and that's okay. New people are entering the sport, which is great. They just have to adapt, right? Their body's got to learn to change. And then our endurance folks. So here, let me tell some of these endurance people that are 50-mile or pluses, or at least, or maybe even just a 32 and beyond, right? So 32 miles and beyond folks think that their cross training consists of high stepping at 500 reps, or squatting 3 sets of 50 reps. So if you get kind of where I'm going here, an endurance athlete does not have to do high repetition cross-training exercises, because they're already doing freaking high repetition things. So come back home and really narrow down, right? Get something heavy on you, a weighted vest, and maybe a barbell or some kettlebells or dumbbells. Slow, lower butt to chair, and then go back up nice and slow. Down, 2, 3, 4, hold, and back up. Okay. So I had a great coach, runner, person. She laid out what her exercise program was. I about fell down and just started laughing. I go, "You are blowing up your quads." And she's like, "I have knee pain, my anterior knee pain." And she kind of talked about this high stepping with resistance, like onto a box, like 500 times, Dr. Mercer, like 500 times. Like, I'm like, just go run your normal trail, and that'll give you your elevation, and wear your water pack. There's your resistance. Like, you're done with that. Come home and recover. Now, the whole stretching thing is an interesting part too, but come home and cool down. Do a little bit of mobility work, do some soft tissue work, do all that stuff is fine. But yeah, don't do high repetition exercise. When you're a high repetition athlete, you're not going to give you're going to get to injury a lot faster.
That is great advice. That is awesome. So thanks for sharing that. Now, I want to ask you sort of a different type of question. So
sure.
You're working with these different athletes. What's it like when you see or hear your patient/athlete achieve their goals after overcoming an injury, versus what's it like, because you talked about your first race and you finished that and felt like, that was a big accomplishment. How will those two things compare and contrast, your accomplishments versus watching folks that you work with hit their goals?
I tell you what, the patient that comes in training for that Boston qualifier to BQ, who's trained a little, you're training hard for that, right? You young folks you have to run fast. And then so as we get older and then the time comes down just a little bit, the training's still really, really rigorous. So I've had a number of people injure and rehab and then go on and Boston qualify and get their shot at it, and you can just tell how happy and elated they are. But I'll tell you what, it's not always even that. It's just I went for a run and it didn't hurt today. Like, that is something. There's like something to that when you go, how long has this been keeping you down? months. I've had people 6 to 8 months. That's just insanity. There's something wrong. We've got to fix that. But yeah, but it's all people's successes far outweigh mine. I'll do that every day. It's the best.
That is awesome. And I mean, that's why you got into PT, is you wanted to help people. And so to see that, help them achieve their goals is so important. And you understand the athlete and the struggles that they go through when they do get injured. So Mike, this has been great.
Oh, this is fun. This type of setting, just to be able to talk and to say, just to kind of, this is all, hey, let's just talk a little bit about, there's not specifics. I don't have, some research and some boring numbers and graphs to go over, but I think, but the basis of this holds true. If you have a strong base, you can build upon it. If you don't, it's hard. So that's the premise. The premise is to get some strength and be patient and know that you will be able to do it. So, the one thing I love about triathlon, it's the battle against myself, right? I have to finish this thing. Don't get me wrong. When that individual runs past me and I look at the calf number and I see where they're at, it makes me mad. Don't get me wrong. It gives me that, that's an age grouper. I've got to catch him or her, and I got to get this done. So it's a battle against yourself, all while there's some fun, good competition in there. Man, triathlon, what a sport. Keep doing it.
I always say it's an individual sport, but you don't do it by yourself. And you really need, a lot of different support for different areas. And obviously having a good physical therapist is really a key to that, because you're right, we don't listen. And so we have to keep you on speed dial and out to you. So Mike, you've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate you, talking
My
about
pleasure.
your start, in undergrad and how you got into PT and these tidbits. Again, as an endurance athlete, go back and listen to the last 15 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of gems in there. So this has been great.
Please do. Thanks, Dr. Mercer. You're the best. I appreciate you having me on. Like I said, I'll talk to anybody, and you tell them I'll talk to them, no problems. Email me, text me, whatever. I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. And thanks everyone for listening.